good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WIDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and we are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning, and we have a busy show in store for you. I know I say it often, but I mean it this time. No, it's a lot to cover when in regards to the Trump campaign, the Harris campaign. I don't know if you saw this hit piece out by The Atlantic attacking Trump. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Joe Biden suggesting that we lock up Donald Trump. Take a look at what some of the numbers are showing us, all that and much more. And we'll be talking with candidate for Chemung County Family Court, Bryan Maggs. He'll be joining us a little bit later on. Looking forward to that. Let's go through some comments from after yesterday's program. Hello, Frank. Well, hello. If time permits, can you, or the viewers in a nutshell, try to explain again the early voting frenzy? I have my reservations and guess I don't understand why a feverish push to do so. Makes me wonder, and I hate to say, but Trump trusted the wrong people in the past, and we know how that ended. Just seems the cheaters would have a better idea on how many ballots to, quote, find. There's a lot of kind of back and forth on the early voting. Republicans and Trump are pushing for people to early vote. I'm going to early vote this year. And one of the main reasons is and I'm going to have a piece later on that shows where the numbers are somewhat looking and what they're looking like, and why this is the case. We'll dive into it a little bit deeper. But the idea at the simple base level is, let's say, and this happened recently in a congressional race where, and I'm not saying this is going to happen on November 5th, but this was more in the winter. There was a snowstorm, and Republicans hadn't got out early, and so it greatly affected the overall outcome because they just could not get to the polls. That's one instance. But let's say, heaven forbid, as J.D. Vance said recently, your kid gets sick and you can't make it, or you have to work a little extra that day, or something comes up. So the idea is get it done early, get it out of the way, and then spend the day, election day, helping the candidates of your choice. Maybe taking a friend for a ride to go vote, that type of thing. I understand your concerns, but what I can't remember the exact line that the Trump campaign uses, but that basically it boils down to the numbers have to be high enough overall after the smoke clears and the election's over. The numbers have to be high enough to stop any kind of cheating, essentially. And I can't remember the exact. They have a great phrase, and it just escapes my mind. So that's the concept there, kind of in a quick nutshell. We are going to have former Congressman Joe Sempolinski on the program next Thursday, and we'll ask him the question because he is also the Steuben County Republican chair. We'll ask him why, and I know that's getting close to Election Day, but we'll ask him why specifically so many Republicans are calling for this. And I do have a piece later on that kind of explains it a little bit better on. Next comment from a different viewer. I sincerely hope that people understand going forward in other elections how critical it is to vote properly for senators, congressmen, mayors, etc., and take the time to attend local board meetings. Great point. This is one that's overlooked, though I think it's one that we've done, I hope, an effective job here on the program highlighting, that the local races affect your life more so than the presidential, your day-to-day life. It is very important to know, and that's why we have all the candidates that we can have on the program or want to be on the program. We have them on the show because we want you, and myself included, I want to know about who we're going to vote for when we go into that voting booth. It's very easy to find out information about Trump and Harris and even your senators and your congressmen to an extent. But in today's media landscape, it's more difficult to find out about who's running for mayor, who's running for town council. And to your point about attending local board meetings, I think, I can't speak for everybody on a board, but I think the boards would love to see that. More people attend their local board meeting, be part of the discussion during the public comment, because very often you hear from the quote-unquote constituents when you're taking out the petitions, when you run every 4 years. But after that, it's relatively quiet. Sometimes if there's something like with house assessments or some maybe major business issue in the community, the public comes out. But otherwise, it's pretty quiet. And I would also encourage, just to add on to that viewer's comments, yes, know who you're voting for when it comes to senator, congressman, mayor, town council, school board. Know all that. But also, if you are politically inclined, get involved. Oh, look at all these waves coming in. Good morning from Tyrone. Hi. Good to hear from you. Wow, look at all those. Get involved, whether that's, and we talk about this with Joe a lot, whether it's helping take out petitions for a candidate that you support, whether it's, making the phone calls for those candidates, or if it's not at the party level, get involved and say, hey, I want to make a difference in my community. I want to be a part of the community. I'm going to run, because many town boards and city councils throughout our area struggle to even find people to be on the board. And yes, it is a time commitment, but you are, again, affecting the day-to-day life of so many people in your community, and I would hope doing it for the right reasons, doing it to better your community. So thank you for that comment. Kind of a public service announcement too. I appreciate it. A different comment, obviously a different comment, but from a different viewer. Good morning, Frank. Well, hey, good morning. Just a thought. The biased media is akin to a bully and needs to be stood up to and put in its place. I would suggest that everyone get a bully's email and tell them what you think. I think, and we're going to get to in a second specifically about the CBS editing of 60 Minutes interview as just a quick update. And I don't know if the email is the right. This one piece is calling for a boycott. I don't know what the answer is there. You would like to think not watching a biased outlet would eventually say, oh man, we screwed up here. Problem with that is if you look at like CNN, they've been going through this for years. Revenue down, viewership down, and it does not seem to bother them, because at the end of the day, it all seems like it's about pushing an agenda. I mean, it's become so bad at CNN. I was looking at it this morning, trying to find an article, and when I clicked on it, I had to subscribe to CNN's website. So I'm not sure what the answer is, but I appreciate the comment. Next up, we got a lot of comments last night from a viewer. So the CDC wasted no time in discovering E. coli outbreak at McDonald's. How timely. I'm curious when the first cases were discovered, because you give Trump some attention and you get punished. I've got to say, and I'm sure you've heard this story. It's a sad story. 1 dead, 10 hospitalized from E. coli, an E. coli outbreak linked to McDonald's. And again, because of the political nature of everything, like that viewer, and I don't want to speak for that viewer, but like that viewer, the first thing I thought of is timing, right? You can't be around politics for any extended period of time and not realize there's very few coincidences. So yes, I understand. When I saw the headline, or I saw it on the nightly news last night, I thought, my first reaction was, are they going to say at the location that Trump was serving from? That was my first thought. And then when it wasn't from that location, I too thought, wow, the timing on this. I will say, from what anecdotal research I've done, none are trying to tie it in with Trump. I haven't even seen an article, and that's not to say they're not out there, that said just recently Trump was at a McDonald's handing out fries. I haven't seen that. That's not to say they're not out there. But yes, anybody that's been around politics for even a short period of time knows that when they see something like that it raises some red flags and it piques your interest. But I don't think anybody is necessarily trying to make that connection. And if you recall, McDonald's came out specifically and said they do not endorse the candidate. This was a franchisee that wanted to have Trump there. McDonald's essentially gave the permission, but made it very clear, and I thought it was a really nice line from McDonald's, that they don't support red, or they're not red or blue, they're golden, like the golden fries. So yes, that story though, I understand why you would think that right off the jump. Okay. Quick update, and then we're going to run late this morning because we have so many stories to get to. Well, I'm already losing some of my stories here. There it is. First up, before we go to our first break, and I know we've talked about her for a while, this love affair from the media with Liz Cheney. And I've asked the question, does Liz Cheney affect the vote? Is this just all the media who have historically done this, love a Republican that goes out and badmouths Republicans? You remember, John McCain was a maverick for breaking with his party and going to the other side on so many votes until he got the nod to be the nominee for president from the Republican Party. Then they hated him. Liz Cheney and her father, they hated, said terrible things in the media until they came out and said that they endorsed Kamala Harris. So now they're loved. I mean, you could point to so many people, Mitt Romney, Chris Christie, the list can go on, where all of a sudden these Republicans get attention. And this is what Liz Cheney is, in my opinion, she wants to be liked by the cool kids. Now, never in my lifetime, or probably your lifetime, have you ever thought of Chris Matthews as the cool kid. But in the world of Washington, so many people want to be liked by the media so badly. From the Republican Party. The Democrats just have it. The Democrats are just going to be liked by the media. Republicans are some that just want to be invited to the certain cocktail parties. They want to be able to feel comfortable when they sit down in front of that national audience and not get the pushback that a typical Republican will. And that's what's happening with Liz Cheney. Not only is she not getting pushback, listen to what Chris Matthews said on MSNBC's Morning Joe. I would think a few years ago I'd ever be singing the praises of a Cheney member of the family. So I think it means I wouldn't think of a few years ago I'd ever be singing the praises of a Cheney member of the family, a member of that family. I really did not like the Iraq War, and I didn't like the neocons. And Cheney was leading them all. And he took us into that war, and it killed almost 200,000 people in Iraq, and it served no purpose. They had a bunker, a barrier against Iran, and they got rid of it. Anyway, she, meaning Liz Cheney, is a character almost out of the movies, out of a Man for All Seasons. I've never seen a more heroic figure than Liz Cheney. She lost her state probably forever. She lost her party. She lost her leadership in the Republican House. She probably could have been on her way to Speaker. It was very probable. She gave it all away in the interest of truth. That's what she stood for. It's amazing to me how few people have gotten behind her. Now, one person who has gotten behind her is Kamala Harris. Those two women sitting together on the stage is remarkable because there's so much courage there from Liz Cheney. I cannot say anything that would stop me from saying she's been unbelievable. I also want to say something to the Democrats. If you're going to use her, repay her when you get into office. It's interesting. He even admits using, the term sometimes in politics, and this is not to name call, but the term in politics is useful idiot. You've probably heard that in the past. So it's interesting that he uses the term use. But just one more time before we go to break. I have never seen a more heroic figure than Liz Cheney. That's according to Chris Matthews. It is good to be a Republican that badmouths Republicans if that's the kind of attention you want. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the CBS 60 Minutes interview. Then we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of the campaigns. There's so much going on as we near less than 2 weeks to Election Day. Early voting here in New York starts on the 26th. As we near, there is so much to cover. And depending on which outlet you go to, it's good for Harris or it's good for Trump. It's bad for Harris, bad for Trump. But there is a lot to wade through and get to the real answers. Also, if you have not seen this morning, there is a hit piece out by The Atlantic, the same writer who released that article quite some time ago suggesting that Trump, with completely anonymous sources, no names mentioned, that someone had said that Trump called World War II veterans like losers or something. Nonsensical. I mean, again, and I know I've said this a million times, and you have to forgive me, if Trump is so bad, why do you then have to make things up? If Trump is so bad, why is it always coming from anonymous sources behind the scenes that may not even have heard the alleged quote, but it was heard from a friend who heard from a friend heard her? Yeah, it's laughable. If it weren't so serious, and the fact that they're trying to use their term, use disinformation to guide the election. So we'll talk about that as well. Stay with us. We're going to run late this morning, I promise you, because that's all we've gotten to, and it's already 14 minutes in. Stay with us. Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact Boss Security for all your business and home security needs. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. So we have a comment from a viewer. If I saw the piece coming out that was suggesting that Trump did not want to pay for a fallen soldier's funeral because she was Mexican, That was the article that I was referencing from The Atlantic. There is a hit piece out. And by the way, the sister has completely denied that that ever happened. There's others, and we're going to get to it later on, that are also denying that it happened. This, you've got to remember, the person who wrote this article is the same person who suggested, again, with no quotes, no audio, like you say in your comment, no audio. They're the same one that suggested that he would say that veterans, I think it was World War II veterans, were losers, something like that. So this is, and I think it's worth noting that this is coming from The Atlantic, that the owner of The Atlantic is a major donor to Kamala Harris. I think that's worth noting. Now, some of the people that they're quoting in this are anti-Trumpers, are never Trumpers. And if these are things that he said, then why did you sit on it for the last 4 years and mention it? Specifically, John Kelly. Yes, John Kelly. Can you believe it? Had nasty things to say about Trump. John Kelly saying it on October the 22nd, or that's at least when the piece came out, of an election year. So if this, why wouldn't you have brought this to people's attention well before this, out of curiosity? This is, unfortunately, this is the swamp and the deep state that Trump has talked about so frequently throughout his whole presidential career. And the media knows how to use either anonymous quotes, to use people that are against Trump. And this goes to that viewer's point from yesterday, saying that Trump hired some bad people around him. He trusted some of the wrong people at first. That's true. This is an example. So yes, we're going to dive into that. But quickly, because I don't want to run late on this, the FCC commissioner, the Federal Communications Commission, top Republican Brendan Carr, because it's a weird commission in the sense that it's Republican, Democrat, so sometimes a Democrat will come out and anyway. He is taking the recent formal complaint serious over the alleged distortion from 60 Minutes. Quote, my colleague, Republican Commissioner Nathan Symington, has been very active on this. What he's pointed out is the news distortion rule is a very, very narrow rule at the FCC. In almost every case, it doesn't apply because it could get into sort of editorial decisions that are protected by the First Amendment. But what he said is that CBS should release the transcript. And the reason why this complaint is not frivolous is because the rules say, for instance, the example we've given is, if you take an answer to a question that is yes and you replace the answer of no from a different question, that's something that would potentially fall within the news distortion rule. So they're calling for, the FCC commissioner is urging CBS to release a transcript. I don't think that'll happen. I think they realize they just have to keep their head down because they do not want to do anything that would hurt Harris in any way, shape, or form. But they know that they can ride it out. Brent Bozell, who used to work anyway for Newsbusters, said CBS has shown its true colors. The home of Walter Cronkite and Dan Rather is no longer just a biased news organization. That's too kind. For years, I've watched the network go from slanted reporting to straight-up propaganda, and now to sheer deceit. The past month has shown that Republicans should have nothing to do with it, and that former President Trump is right to call attention to these issues. First, CBS moderators broke the network's own pledge not to fact-check during the vice presidential debate, deliberately targeting J.D. Vance and doing so dishonestly. Remember, he had to end up fact-checking the fact-checker. Then came the internal meltdown and hysterical staff meetings after CBS Mornings host Tony DeCaprio dared to ask October 7th apologist Tanisha Coates challenging on-air questions about her new anti-Israel book. After that, House Speaker Mike Johnson exposed CBS for cutting out a third of his recent Face the Nation interview. I did not realize that. Johnson's team was smart. They recorded the interview and provided the deception for all to see. The final straw came Sunday when the network finally released a statement about its 60 Minutes interview with Harris, stemming from its October 6th release of a teaser that showed her nonsensical answer to a question on Israel. Social media erupted at the typical Harris word salad exercise, but in the actual 60 Minutes interview that aired a day later, Harris miraculously had a completely different answer. Did CBS perform a selective edit to do crisis control on Harris's behalf? Instead of explaining the discrepancy, 2 weeks later, CBS blamed, yes, we mentioned it numerous times on this program, none other than Donald Trump. He had called the interview deceptively edited, to which CBS answered that is false. Their answer itself is a lie. The interview was edited, and it smells to high heaven. But see, they're so cocky and so arrogant, they don't care that they showed a completely different answer in one segment and then a completely different answer in the next, because they just know they're going to get away with it. Did network staffers do this of their own accord, or are they in cahoots with the Harris campaign? Was the editing done in the interest of good journalism or to make Harris look good? CBS could easily clear up this matter by releasing the transcript and the video. Instead, it's responding like a liberal super PAC would. This calls for a coordinated response. Republicans would be smart to follow Johnson's example if they choose to engage with CBS by insisting on recording their interviews themselves. Better yet, they should boycott the network until it releases the full transcript and complete video of the Harris interview and disclose any communications with the Harris campaign or the Democratic National Committee between the airing of the teaser clip on October 6th and the broadcast on 60 Minutes the next day. Trump should lead the charge by announcing a refusal to engage with the network in any capacity, interviews, debates, or any other event. He's already set the tone by refusing to do 60 Minutes. But these efforts must persist beyond 2024 because they know if they can just make it past Election Day, all is forgotten. The fight itself isn't just about the election. It's about the dismantling of the corrupt media Democrat alliance that undermines democracy itself. I suspect many would follow Trump's lead. Americans are prepared to flush the commode. Gallup just found that only 31% of us express a great deal or fair amount of confidence in the media to report the news fully, accurately, and fairly. That's an all-time low, and we've mentioned on this program numerous times. Politicians and news contributors can replace their appearances on CBS by collaborating with honest journalists who are carving out their own spaces in online reporting. CBS has made it clear that it can no longer be trusted as an honest disseminator of news. It has become nothing more than the propaganda arm of the Democrat Party. We have an opportunity to change the narrative now. So the idea, if you're running, if you're Congress, Senator, say, I'm not giving you this interview opportunity. Same with Trump, and Trump has already started it with the 60 Minutes. Denying them an interview with the presidential candidate. All right, we got to take a break. Yes, we are going to talk about that piece from The Atlantic, but we're probably going to start with a few Harris things here first, coming up a little bit later on. Man, you guys are waving a lot this morning. I like it. We are going to be talking with candidate for Chemung County Family Court, and that's Bryan Maggs. He's going to be joining us in a little bit. How's that? Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking right here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security and Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. How about this? Good morning from the Corning Trump House. Beautiful photo. Thank you. If you forget that's there, that probably spooks you a little bit in the morning, doesn't it? Welcome back as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio this morning. By the way, I should add that. Biden, with just 14 days to go, that was yesterday, before election, suggesting that we got to lock him up, meaning Trump. If I had said this 5 years ago, you'd lock me up. We got to lock him up. After quite a pause, he then realized he should backtrack, saying politically lock him up, lock him out. And that's what we've got to do. Needless to say, the Trump campaign hit back quickly, accusing Biden of making a Freudian slip. Joe Biden just admitted the truth. He and Kamala's plan all along has been to politically persecute their opponent, President Trump, because they can't beat him fair and square. The Harris-Biden administration is the real threat to democracy. We call on Kamala Harris to condemn Joe Biden's disgraceful remarks. A person close to Biden, who often misspeaks in public, meaning Biden, not the person close to Biden, told the Post that the president's follow-up comment meant that he hadn't intended to call for Trump to be incarcerated. However, the president and his aides typically refrain from commenting at all on the 4 pending criminal cases against Trump, who contends that a quartet of local and federal indictments last year were politically motivated to aid Biden's then re-election campaign. And that's why I think it's interesting when you see a Harris campaign or at the DNC where they have a chance of lock him up, because it plays right into the idea of this lawfare against Trump. So they're calling on Biden or the Harris's campaign to condemn Joe Biden's statement. Joe Biden just admitted the truth. He and Kamala's plan all along has been to politically persecute the opponent, President Trump, because they can't beat him fair and square, were their comments. Donald Trump Jr. tweeting out, "They're not even hiding it. The lawfare against my dad was always about election interference." And yeah, saying, hey, he just admitted it. He just admitted the truth. Your thoughts on that? Now, I want to get into we're going to talk about the Atlantic piece, and this is why. Because right now there are reports, and it depends on where you go. Keep in mind, polls and things like that are always, they are what they are. You can take them if you want and treat them as gospel. Personally, I don't. Personally, I think they're just misused constantly. But depending on what outlet you go to, it's really close with Harris, or some have Trump up, some have Harris up. But according to the New York Post, Democrats are kind of quietly panicking behind the scenes about Harris's strategy. And one of the reasons is, you may have seen this announced yesterday, that Harris is actually going to spend some campaign time in Texas. They're not really sure the reason for that, reminiscent of, where was it, when Hillary Clinton didn't go to Wisconsin, and they were saying, why are you not doing this? With 2 weeks left before the last votes of the 2024 presidential election are cast, some Democrats are beside themselves over Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign strategy. This is coming from the New York Post. The last straw came yesterday morning when the Harris-Walz team announced that rather than hit up 7 key swing states, which most polls show moving away from the Democrat ticket, Harris would travel to deep red Texas to give a speech on abortion rights and stump with the party's Senate candidate, Representative Colin Allred. Now, that is an important race because Ted Cruz is in a really tight race there. But is that, you're talking a very, very limited time, folks, less than 2 weeks. Is that how you spend a day or even an afternoon? If you recall back in 2016, and I can't remember exactly because 2020 obviously was a little different with COVID and everything, but with Trump in 2016, I think that last day, what did he do, like 3 or 4 rallies? That last, not the actual last day, but the last day you go out and campaign. They're not thinking blue wall at all. They're just not thinking, one Democrat vented to the Post about this Texas trip. Her press operation is that of a first-time congressional candidate running as a sacrificial lamb, the person added. Those are, now again, anonymous sources. And just like I definitely don't believe the anonymous sources coming from the Atlantic, this is one where, I think the New York Post does not, I know that the New York Post would not just go out and fabricate a source, but how important that source is, et cetera. It could just be a Democrat that's upset. But I think that there is something to be said there, that her press operation is that of a first-time congressional candidate running as a sacrificial lamb. And we heard last week in Pennsylvania, there are a lot of people upset, Democrats upset in Pennsylvania with the head of the Pennsylvania campaign and how Pennsylvania's been treated, not being able to get the message out that Trump and Vance are out messaging the Harris-Walz ticket. Now, the blue wall refers to the states of Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, all 3 of which have gone Democrat in every election between 92 and 2020, with the exception of 2016, when Republican Donald Trump swept the board against Hillary Clinton. I think her press team actually works for Trump, the disgruntled Democrat added, noting in their opinion, the 45th president has made a better case for himself than her. While Michigan has been one of the best polling states for Harris, according to the public surveys, NBC News reported Tuesday that anxiety is growing inside the Democrat camp, that the Veep could lose the state's 15 electoral votes, in part due to a backlash over the Israel-Hamas war among one of the largest Arab American populations in the U.S. Just last month, Representative Elise Slotkin, who is locked in a tight race for Senate, was recorded telling donors that Harris was underwater in the Wolverine state. According to the Detroit Free Press, Trump has made 13 visits to Michigan so far this year, while Harris has made just 9 since Biden ended his re-election bid. Most of Harris's events have taken place in Detroit and the surrounding Democrat stronghold of Wayne County, leaving voters elsewhere in Michigan feeling left out. I tell you what, Trump is here like every weekend, one voter, Stephanie Smith, told the Post. I'm getting sick of it. Frankly, I wish he'd stop. This is Harris's first stop in Grand Rapids, and we're just 2 weeks away. We're the second largest city in the state of Michigan. The bad news may not end there for the vice president. NBC News quoted a senior Harris campaign source as saying Tuesday that, quote, there has been a thought that maybe Michigan or Wisconsin will fall off the map for the Democrats, with a person and two others stressing that Michigan was the most pressing concern. Fear that Trump has a late momentum is even more pronounced in the biggest prize of the three blue wall states, and that's Pennsylvania with its 19 electoral votes. Quote, it's Pennsylvania. I think it's always been Pennsylvania, mused a second Democrat source. And we've talked about that quite extensively on this program, and still the shock of why Josh Shapiro wasn't chosen, the governor of, obviously, Pennsylvania, wasn't chosen for her vice presidential pick. Because many people, and this is even going back to Biden, obviously, that the White House goes through Pennsylvania. And that's why there's been so many opportunities. If you wanted to make a trip to see Trump, to see Vance, if you wanted to see Walz, if you wanted to see Harris. So this is leading into my next topic, and I don't know if we'll have time before our guest comes in, but if this is true, okay, that there behind the scenes there's some concern, and you can take that with a grain of salt, whatever you think, because I can show you articles that will say they'll say the same opposite type of quotes. So just bringing that up to kind of point in the direction of what is being done to maybe build that momentum back to Harris. What is being done to maybe solidify her base and win that blue wall, or just in general. That I do think it's interesting, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I do think it's interesting that she is going to campaign in Texas. I know that's an important race. Some could look at that and say, well, maybe she's so confident that she's got this thing in the bag that she also wants to boost up the Senate for Democrats. Maybe that's an argument that could be made. I don't think that's an argument too many people are making, but there does seem to be some concern amongst Democrats of why she is spending the time in Texas, just like there was concern when she was doing interviews with friendly outlets like The View, Stephen Colbert, saying that's not reaching the new voters she needs to reach. That's not reaching anybody but people that already support her. So there's something to be said there as well. I've got to take a break. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Frankly Speaking, here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact Boss Security for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio here on Historic Market Street in Corning. We have a lot to get to. We got a lot of comments too. Thank you for all the comments this morning. Why do you 90% of the time quote from the Post? Because they back Trump-only reasons or Trump-only reason? No, that's not the case at all. I like their opinion pieces, but no, I do quote quite a few other outlets. I would say, well, I could go through my whole show prep if you want, but I would say there's a good, of course, there's a good amount of the New York Post, but I like the way that they narrow down the quotes. Fox News, sometimes the articles get a little long. I think the Post, though, if you're referring to the opinion pieces, because I think they're very often thought-provoking. So there you go. Okay, next up. I dropped off a marketplace sale yesterday to a retired Marine. He noticed a sticker in my window, and that was the Triumph sticker that outlines Trump in it that we've been showing on the program. At first, he said he voted for Trump last election, but wasn't going to vote this election. We stood in the Krispy Kreme parking lot talking for an hour. He told me he was happy JD was a Marine. I told him he would have our backs. Then I said the country needs one more Marine's help, and if he voted for JD to be vice president, I'd give him 2 stickers. He promised that he would vote for Trump. Jack the sticker guy on the job in Tennessee. Thanks, Jack. Appreciate that comment. By the way, to the viewer, no, I do not have John Kelly's email. Next up, good morning again. Could you imagine what the biased media would do to President Trump if he did what Hillary Clinton did? You know, it is interesting because look at, again, I know we have a lot of viewers out there that do not like Trump and can quote ad nauseum why they don't like Trump. But what I don't understand is if Trump is so bad, okay, why are there pieces like we see in the Atlantic that have to use 10 anonymous sources to make an article? Why is it always coming from anonymous sources or someone that isn't anonymous but obviously worked to get Trump out of there? You know, I mean, that's why they like Liz Cheney so much in a different way, because they can use Liz Cheney to go against Trump and say that she's a Republican. The same goes with like a John Kelly saying, who was worked against Trump, to be able to quote him because unfortunately in his title he had worked for Trump, right? And that goes to the viewer's point that we had at the very beginning of the program that Trump had trusted some people at the beginning. And I think he said this in interviews, but maybe not in the same terms, saying that he knew. When I talked to him on that one interview, I asked him what was the most surprising thing, having never been in politics before, and he said he knew, and I'm paraphrasing, he knew business people were bad, but he didn't, and he knew politicians were bad, but he didn't know they were that bad. The same idea that when he got in there, and this was before he won in 2016, but he didn't realize how dirty politics could get. I think that was the same thing. He thought he was going to run it like a business, a little bit more than he could when you have people behind the scenes working against him. Think of the whistleblowers, the leaks, all of that coming from the White House. Now, I mentioned this earlier from a comment that a viewer had made about early voting. And we'll dive more in depth over that with former Congressman Joe Semplinsky, who will be on next Thursday. But this is, according to Mark Halperin, the editor-in-chief of the two-way video platform. He used to be, where was he on? He was a long-time journalist. But he was quoted yesterday as saying, if the early vote numbers stay the way they are, and that's a big if, we'll almost certainly know before Election Day who's going to win. Make no mistake, if these numbers hold up in the states where we can understand even partially what the data is like, we'll know that Donald Trump's going to be president on Election Day. NBC News, there it is. The former NBC News reporter stressed that early voting numbers need to be tracked day to day, and that those figures are more important than the polls right now. Saying, quote, it's more important than almost anything. This is Halperin. Because it's giving us insight into a variety of factors that are accounting for Republican overperformance by various metrics in the early voting in the battleground states. That the Democrats usually have a huge lead in, and this was Clark County, Vegas, but right now it's just 4,500 votes. The rurals are overperforming their share of the electorate. Now, again, take this with a grain of salt, and he even says that. Don't overread the early vote, okay? He said it can change. We don't know exactly who's casting these ballots, how they're voting, etc. But every analyst I've talked to in the last 24 hours, including people who speak publicly, say if this continues, Donald Trump can't lose because the Democrats can't possibly do well enough on Election Day. Now, again, I don't like predictions like that. I don't like statements like that. Maybe... especially if you're a superstitious type person, you may not feel comfortable hearing someone say that. And I also think there's a part of that, and polls do this a lot too, hoping to convince people, see, it isn't really that important to go out and vote. It turns out you were busy that day. See, your guy is going to win. Or on the other side, Harris's people have to get out. So it's just something, when we talk about the early voting, tracking in a sense of what's going on. But again, it really boils down to the simplest part is, heaven forbid something happens on Election Day and you can't make it, you have a week ahead of time where you could have made it. So get there while everything's good, and then hope for the best on Election Day, and maybe then get out and support your candidate. All right, we've got to take a short break. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. The Boss Security Roof Cam. Visit Boss Security in Horseheads today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. So let's talk about this Atlantic piece. The Atlantic piece by Jeffrey Goldberg. And we'll dive a little bit into about Jeffrey Goldberg here in a little bit. But there's a few things that he alleges in this piece, which is that Trump praised, I don't know if praised is the right word, but that he was preoccupied with dictators and his disdain for the American military, that he had talked poorly about a brave soldier that lost her life. Now, that soldier's sisters come out and say that's absolutely not the case. We are going to talk about that. Obviously, there is a lot to cover, But first, as we have our guests come in and get settled down, I do have a couple quick public service announcements we'll get to, but we'll talk more about that article in just a little bit. Okay, do not forget that today at our good friends at the Painted Post Food Pantry, they're holding their healthy and nutritional workshops. Would you like to learn more about eating a diet rich in whole plant foods to improve your health? We'll join them for a cooking demonstration and tasting by Mary Ellen Bunch. licensed food for life instructor and plant-based chef. That's from 10:30 this morning to 11:30. And today's topic, breakfast food. And that's at the United Church of Painted Post, 201 North Hamilton Street in Painted Post. Also, just quickly before we take our last break, I want to give you this is not by any means the final count on interviews, but interviews are really starting to pack in here, and I wanted to give you a heads up. So today, of course, we're going to be talking to Bryan Maggs. Thursday, Mary Tarantelli, and we're going to learn about the Walk for Life here in Corning. On Friday, we'll be talking with Apple Ridge about their upcoming health fair, and because it is Friday and it's Fridays with Phil, we'll be talking with Assemblyman Phil Palmisano. On Monday, we'll be talking with Michaela Rossetti Azimi. She's running for Steuben County Court Judge as well as Family Court Judge. And then on Tuesday, we'll be talking with Supreme Court, New York State Supreme Court candidate in the 7th Judicial District, Stacey Romeo. And then on Thursday, former Congressman, current Assembly candidate, and also chair of the Republican Party in Steuben County, Joe Sempolinski, will be joining us. And I have about 5 or 6 that have not been set in stone. So we're going to probably be averaging around 2 interviews a day up until Election Day. So you'll want to tune in every weekday morning starting at 6. All right, we're going to get ready for our guests. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. And in the studio this morning, we have candidate for Chemung County Family Court Judge Bryan Maggs. Good morning.
Hey, Frank. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, it's great to have you back. We got a great response from your last interview. So let's talk about the campaign. How's it going?
It's been great. As I told you last time I was here, I've been out knocking on doors, and I probably hit hundreds of doors a week, so
Yeah.
that puts me over another 500 doors since I came back. I think I was at 4,000. I'm up to about 4,500. With a couple weeks left, I'm just marching on to the finish.
You've lucked out with the weather.
You know, just yesterday, people were saying that you picked a great day. I said, I've been walking since June.
Yeah.
You know, I kind of took May off after petitions, but the weather, maybe not so much for some people, but for me, it's been great.
Perfect. Yeah, it's too bad this wasn't the weather for petition season, right?
It was chilly, but we dealt with it.
We can't complain. And we'll ask a little bit later on about what voters have been saying to you and people that you talk to. But let's first start for people that aren't aware, because there's a lot going on right now, as you know. And we had a great event the other night with the Republicans. And there's so many candidates running, and I don't think we talked about it, and I've talked about it on the show in the past, there's not a lot of media outlets where people can find out more about you. So let's start right there. Let's talk about your background.
Yeah, I'm going to go through it quickly.
Yeah.
When I was 18, I enlisted in the Army as a combat medic. After 7 years as a medic going through law school, I became a JAG officer just before 9/11. One of my first duties as a JAG officer was to help mobilize soldiers that went overseas in response to that terrorist attack. I then spent another, 17, 18 years, whatever it was, 27 years total, almost 20 years as a JAG, doing a lot of family assistance, soldiers and families of deployed soldiers that were in need. And it was a very fulfilling and sometimes difficult and tragic type of job.
Well, and that's what I find interesting about Family Court specifically, and maybe I'll ask you why you decided to run for this position, because it's got to be an emotionally difficult job, but also an emotionally rewarding job at times.
You nailed it.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, that's the thing about Family Court. I don't shy away from the emotion. I look to help people that are in need. So that's the reason I joined the military.
Sure.
It's the reason that I gravitate toward positions where there's help that can be offered, and to whom much is given, much is expected. And I look at that for myself. Working in the family court system as a prosecutor for juvenile delinquency, I didn't look at that prosecution as I look to lock this kid up.
Right.
Family court is a services court, and you look to make a difference so that we don't have kids that turn into more problematic adults. And it's the same thing with parents. So the rewards that you can get from helping parents that are struggling, whether they're just parents that are going through a divorce, parents that have kids that are difficult, parents that need help to figure out how to parent better. It's a way that, even though there's a lot of emotion, you cut through it, you find the services that the kids need, and you make a difference.
Well, and I'm sure, not to put words in your mouth, but you want to make that difference early on, because at a time when we talk about public safety and we talk about some real issues in the community, if you can kind of nip that in the bud, as Barney Fife would have said, early on, that's got to be very rewarding, another rewarding part of family court.
Yeah, you can't help everybody. Obviously, we
Well,
know
of
that.
course, yeah.
But definitely, without a doubt, the ability for family court judges to use the system and the resources that are available in the community. And that is one thing that I think is just really important. Working for the Department of Social Services for the number of years that I did, it's an absolutely unique experience that no one else could even imagine. Between all the departments that we have, the amount of money that the county spends through the Department of Social Services to provide services to individuals, many of whom, not all of whom, but many of whom come through family court, you get to see how the programs work, what's effective in utilizing the programs, the services that are under contract with the Department of Social Services to provide assistance to the families and the kids that need them. And most importantly, moving them through the system as quickly as possible, because we have attorneys that charge money for, obviously they need to, for representing people that come into court. And the efficiencies that can be gained by having someone that understands the county system. And I've worked in the county system for 22 years.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. So your time with the county, how does that translate to family court?
Well, in multiple layers. I started out working in the court system in Chemung County, so understanding the court system from the inside, that's important. I then went to work at the Department of Social Services, being just an assistant attorney, prosecuting abuse and neglect and juvenile delinquency and PINS cases. So understanding that role. But from there, once I started getting promotions, and I supervised the family court attorneys at the Department of Social Services, and I worked closely with the CPS caseworkers, the service providers, and then being county attorney, overseeing the administration of legally of all the departments, working with the county executive and attending high-level meetings, just understanding how the reimbursements work from the state and how the court system, when it bogs down, how it really drains the resources. And then at a different level, for the last 6 years, I've been working as the attorney to the Chemung County Legislature, a completely different perspective, but gained a completely different level of insight into some of the ways that the county solves problems.
And speaking of that, solving problems, when you look at, if you are ultimately at the end of the day the new family court judge, what will your focus be on as the judge, and what can be done in your mind differently and maybe better, in the future?
The focus is always the kids. So even when parents are in and you don't even see the kids, you know that they're there because they have kids that are subject to the jurisdiction of the court. So the focus is on the kids. And what can happen differently and better that people should be extremely interested in is moving people through the system as quickly as possible, understanding that I've also been in private practice. Some attorneys running for judge at times have never been in private practice. So there are all sorts of pressures that I ran a law firm. There are pressures that are on attorneys. So holding attorneys accountable, holding parents accountable, holding the service providers, the Department of Social Services, everybody that's involved, and not allowing they're overworked. I understand that. So I understand the workload, but I also understand the need to move things quickly.
And does that seem to be a major issue? We've talked about a backlog with many different judge candidates that I've had on the program, not just specifically here. Is backlog a major issue?
It is a major issue. It's one reason why we're adding another court seat.
I want to talk about that in a second.
So adding a second full-time family court judge should help the backlog. Another issue, quite frankly, is the lack of attorneys that are available. There was a I won't call it quite a crisis, but there was a real problem with recruitment of attorneys. I think that's being alleviated. Chemung County's attorneys in the mostly the defense bar, the public advocate and the public defender's office are becoming more fully staffed. The legislature passed a pay increase to help recruit. So if anybody out there is interested in a job, there are still some vacancies. Okay. And having more attorneys available cuts down on the unavailability at the time you're trying to schedule things more quickly. So that was a problem.
Where do you think that lack of attorneys comes from? Is that just like it seems like every county we talk to, they're just people are looking to hire everywhere? Is that the case?
I've been in the business long enough. I've seen when I graduated law school, it was 2000. The market was difficult. It was difficult to get a job. I was fortunate to go work at the appellate division of the Supreme Court in Albany. It was an extremely competitive job to try to obtain. And then when I applied at law firms after I finished my court service, again, it was competitive. But it dried out. It expanded. I think currently it's because we have older attorneys that are retiring.
Sure.
And even though there are new attorneys, some of what I hear is law school graduates don't want to come to the office. They want to work remotely.
Yeah.
And family court's not.
That doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way. It is
That's a good
attorney.
point. You see those articles. It's in every profession. I guess we all got used to it during COVID, and everybody wants to stay home. I can't blame them. I like wearing pajamas too.
Right.
Right to work. So you had mentioned that there's a new position open. So there's two family court judges. If you don't mind, explain the race for people that aren't aware. When they go into the voting booth, how's that process going to go for them?
Sure. On the ballot, every position most likely that everybody in Chemung County is going to see on the ballot is a vote for one, except for the family court seat. It'll say vote for up to two. And there'll be two places where you can select two columns, if you will.
Yeah.
So there's two Republicans running and one Democrat running. You can vote for any two of those three candidates.
Okay. And that's important to note because a lot of times your mind doesn't go right to the fact that you can vote for two, even no matter how many names are on there. So I kind of want to, myself, I want to stress and reiterate to everybody watching, make sure to pay attention, not just in Chemung, but in Steuben, pay attention to the ballot. Don't go in blind, and make sure that you note that it says vote two, or otherwise you are throwing away a vote. So we talked about the fact that you've been knocking on a lot of doors. You spent a lot of time on that.
I did.
Are you going to miss it?
I think I will.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always been a people person.
Sure.
I've coached youth sports every sports season that exists for the last 20 years, except for this one. Now that my kids are all in college, I miss that a little bit. But knocking on doors, meeting people. Yeah. I'm not worried about not meeting people. There'll be plenty of people coming into court if I were lucky enough to get the job. And knocking on doors it's really a way that you can put your pulse on, your finger on the pulse of the community, and hear what people are thinking and what their concerns are.
Well, and I want to ask about those concerns, but I know I talk about this with, I think, everybody. Isn't it interesting because something may come up to you that you weren't even aware of, and it'll be so eye-opening. And I think that's why the petition process is really, at the end of the day, an amazing process, and the campaigning and the old knocking on doors way of campaigning, because you will learn about things that you may not even know existed in Chemung County.
It's true. Yeah. You meet people, you hear about what they're concerned about, and sometimes you're surprised by what people tell you.
Yeah. I know a long time ago, I ran for town council back when I was just getting out of college, and I had a nice long conversation with a wonderful lady about her newspaper subscription coming in late every morning. And I explained there's not much I could do, but I would be more than happy to make a call. But anyway, that's what I'm talking about. But in all seriousness, when people are talking to you, what are the biggest concerns that they're seeing when you talk family court?
Well, when I talk family court, it remains homelessness.
Yeah.
The concern about mental health, homelessness, and to a slightly lesser extent, the lack of respect and accountability that children have or apparently have nowadays. I try to tell people that, in my experience, there are great kids and there are not great kids.
Yeah. Just like grown-ups.
Just like right. So I don't know that people are necessarily different. Times are different, but people are definitely concerned about the direction that kids are going. People feel like kids don't work hard, that they don't respect authority, and we all see it. Yeah. So it's not a surprise.
And I think even that's why it's interesting when the media sometimes, downplaying the public safety and homelessness and like that, because it's something just like inflation that you can see every single day, unfortunately.
You can, and I think a lot of the issue is kids need a purpose. So kids when they don't have something to do, whether it's sports, music, reading, clubs, community service, church, something to keep them involved. They find something to do, and usually what kids find to do isn't necessarily the best thing to do. So one of the things that the family court system can do is use the services that are available to give kids a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging, and the judge is a huge part in that.
And we received the question, I'm not going to ask because I know that you can't really necessarily answer it, but I do think it's interesting, and this has come up to me every time I interview a judicial candidate. Isn't it interesting how for this one time of your life you have to be political and it has to be Republican or Democrat, but if you do become the family court judge, you cannot talk politics?
Yeah, people, just yesterday, someone said, they'll ask me, because I don't, when I go to their doors, I don't tell them, that I'm a Republican, not because I'm, ashamed of being a Republican by any means, but I don't see a judicial race as a political race, but I tell them you have to run on a political line. That's just the way the system is.
You have no choice.
I'll identify as a Republican because that's what I am. It's what I've been my whole life, and there are strong reasons for that. So it is odd that you can't be political, but you have to be political during this period of time.
And almost like hyper political for this short period of time. Right. So it's very odd. But so if this person, I don't want them to think I'm ignoring them. It's a great question, but not one that can be answered. So has there been any surprises during the campaign?
Not to me. Not to me. The all the focus is on the big races, nationally, and what's going to happen in particular in places like Pennsylvania. So everybody is paying attention to that.
Sure.
My biggest surprise personally is how much support I have.
Oh, that's great.
How many people, I'll knock on their doors and they'll say, "I've seen your signs all around. I didn't really know you." I said, "Well, that's why I'm here. I'm here to talk to you. I'm here to give you some information. Here to answer any questions that you have about me, any questions you have about the position," and they leave with a smile and a handshake, and we go on our way. So that's been the surprise for me, has been the support and the reception. And
I know normally when someone's being interviewed, they always say humbled by, but have you been humbled by the endorsements that you've received? Because you've received great endorsements.
I am. The number of people that came forward and asked, and when I've asked them that have endorsed me, between county legislators, businessmen, Sheriff Schramm, former county executive Tom Santulli, lots and lots of people, and it is humbling, and there are many more that aren't on my published list.
Sure. Just before we go, a couple last questions here. Where can people find out more about your campaign? And we thank you right here on the program for being on twice, because that's been a big goal of ours to get the word out, and so people know when they go in the booth why they're voting. But if they have more questions, where can they find out instead of waiting for you to knock on their door?
Sure. The best place to find out more about me is my Facebook page.
Okay.
That's the best place. Or you stop down to Chemung County Republican headquarters. I tend to go there at least twice a week, just stop in and meet people that are coming in.
Oh, that's great.
Talk to them there as they're picking up lawn signs for various candidates. It's been a great way to meet people there. Call my law office, make an appointment. You can meet with me anytime.
Sure.
I'm very accessible. A lot of people contact me through Facebook Messenger. And ask me questions or things. If I can't answer them because of the nature of the question, I politely decline. But that's the best way.
And now we need, and this is not a gotcha question, I just need an update from the last time you were on. At the end of the day, we're just 2 weeks out. How many pocket constitutions will you have given away, do you think?
Well, so I just opened my last box of 200.
Good timing.
Which puts me at 2,300 that I've given away.
Wow.
And with 200 to go, I will run out in the next 2 weeks with all the doors that I'm going to be knocking on. So I will have handed out 2,500 constitutions. Yesterday there was a family, really nice family over on the east side of Elmira. It was kind of a rough section of town, but it's really heartwarming when you see these kinds of things. There's a family. There was 4 kids and mom and dad out in the driveway just playing in a tough section of town. And I walk up, introduce myself, happen to be a minority family, and I said, "Who wants the Constitution?" And all the kids are raising their hand, give it to me. And they were fighting over it. It was really nice to see. It was great.
I wish there were more grown-ups that would do that, fight over the Constitution. So in closing, what do you say to voters before they head to the booth, either early voting on starting on the 26th or on the 5th?
Yeah, first, get out to vote. Remember, it's an election where you can vote for two family court judge candidates in Chemung County. Experience is the key in a race like this, and the amount of experience that I have, both the depth of the experience and the breadth of the experience between my time in the military doing family law. I've worked for the Department of Social Services. I worked as a prosecutor and a supervisor of family court attorneys for 17 years. I've worked for the executive branch, the judicial branch, the legislative branch. I venture to say there's no judicial candidate around that has had the depth and breadth of experience that I do.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you. This is the second time, and I appreciate that. I want to wish you best of luck.
Thanks, Frank.
All right, we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. Stay with us. Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security and Horseheads. Contact Boss Security for all your business and home security needs. Thank you to Bryan Maggs for being on the program this morning. As I mentioned, it is going to be a busy couple of weeks in a good way. And you'll have the opportunity to hear from as many candidates as possible. Tomorrow, Mary Tarantelli, who's also running for Chemung County Family Court, will be on the program. We'll also learn tomorrow about Walk for Life here in Corning. Friday, Assemblyman Phil Palmisano, who is up for re-election, though running unopposed. But we're going to talk to him about issues at the state level, but also just what he's seeing on the ground as Election Day nears. And we're also going to hear from Apple Ridge on Friday about their health fair that's coming up. On Monday, Michaela Rossetti Azimi is going to be on the program. She is running for Steuben County Court Judge as well as Family Court Judge in Steuben County. She will be joining us. Her opponent, Matt McCarthy, will be on as well. I haven't updated my list, but that's been set in stone for a while. I've just been writing these down as I remember them. On Tuesday, Supreme Court, New York State Supreme Court in the 7th Judicial District. Stacey Romeo will be on the program. Thursday, Joe Sempolinski. As I said, other ones are being set in stone and moved around so that they can fit as perfectly as possible. But I think we're going to get to the point, as it looks now, that we'll be doing 2 interviews a day, probably that last week, give or take. Okay. Would it be possible for you to post locations and hours for early voting locations? Yes, I can definitely do that. I will do that. Is there a specific area? If everybody's okay with it, when we come back from break, I'll do Chemung and Steuben. If you want others, let me know, and I'd be more than happy to read them. I just don't have them in front of me. But thank you for that comment. Another comment from a different viewer. Oops, that was a wave. Is, good morning, Frank. I would like to stress the extreme importance of the proposition on the ballot this year. As per myself, I believe this will shape the future of our state, and I will vote no. Thank you very much. I am going to have on, if you watched the program a couple weeks ago, we had Bobby Ann Cox was on the program. She's a lawyer who's been really campaigning around the state, talking about the need to vote no on Proposition 1. That is an amendment to the New York State Constitution. It's got a lot of, I don't even know if, you can't say unintended consequences. It's got a lot of consequences, and they're not good. So I appreciate you, and people can call in and or text in and make their endorsements about where they stand on these issues. But if you're not familiar with it, we are going to have another discussion on Prop 1 as we near Election Day, and I will make sure to highlight that as that one gets scheduled. As I said, I've got about 5 out that they're just, everybody's working with each other's schedules, and it's not that they're not going to be on. It's just we're just trying to figure out the last minute logistics of it. She is going to be on at some point to talk about Prop 1. I'm also going to be asking Assemblyman Phil Palmisano his opinion on it, and others, because many people are very concerned, and I think rightfully so. If you recall, Bobby Ann Cox, when she was on the program, saying, she said and I'm paraphrasing, I am not a Republican, but I'm telling you to vote no on this, because many think the no vote is just Republicans saying no. She's saying no. The what can happen with this in the future is terrifying. And you use the term unintended consequences, but I think they were intended. But the if nothing else, the lawsuits that will arise from it will be overwhelming. So thank you for that comment. I think the problem is, as is typical with politicians in Albany and Washington, but in Albany in this case, they have worded it in a way to be very misleading on your ballot, to make it sound as if you vote no, you're against diversity, that you're against or that you're for discrimination in some way. That is not the case at all. And you've got to remember, when the media tells you that it's about kind of codifying abortion and making sure that it's here to stay in New York State, well, then I ask the question, why is abortion not mentioned in the changes? So there's a lot of misleading PR going on behind the scenes. Okay. So we've got, if you are just joining us, we were talking about, and we just had a second to talk about it before our guest came on, but the Atlantic piece that quotes anonymous sources, and then it quotes people like no friend of Trump, Marine General John Kelly, who says that Trump said that Hitler did some good things. That's what John Kelly is suggesting here. Now, interesting that he decided to sit on that piece of knowledge 4+ years and wait until October, right, we'll say the beginning of mid-October, to make that statement. I think to Trump supporters, they look at something like this as another prime example of kind of the swamp trying to oust Donald Trump. I'm not going to go into every quote. I don't want to fall into the trap of quoting this piece. You can find it for yourself. I think it was actually linked this morning on Drudge Report. But the article suggests that he has a preoccupation, meaning Trump, with dictators and has a disdain for the American military. I'm not even sure where this is coming from. One of the stories they point to, and again, this is all, you've got to remember, this is all coming from anonymous sources. It's coming from hearsay. And this is, well, let's get right into it. You know what? It's almost 7:30 already, so let's get right to it. John Kelly, see, now places like MSNBC, CNN are running with this story, again, with no real credible sources attached to it. The only person that is attached to it is John Kelly, who has not been a supporter of Trump for quite some time. John Kelly, I don't want to go in and quote all of John Kelly, but one of the stories is regarding deceased U.S. Army soldier Vanessa Guillen. She was killed, and I don't remember, I had it here this morning. She was bludgeoned to death by a fellow soldier at Fort Hood. That's what it was. Not that you need that graphic extra information. And what this article, again, based on anonymous sources, no specific names, no audio, no nothing like that, suggested that Trump said in very unsavory terms that he wasn't going to pay $60,000 for her funeral, and that and then brought in, which again, okay, and then almost used it to disparage Mexican Americans in a way. It's very, listen, if Trump is as bad as they say, I don't know why it's always coming from anonymous sources and behind the scenes accounts from people that hate him. But going back to this, Vanessa Guillen, who is deceased, her sister, Mara Guillen, posted directly on X about this article from The Atlantic, saying, "Wow, I don't appreciate how you are exploiting my sister's death for politics. Hurtful and disrespectful to the important changes she made for service members. President Donald Trump did nothing but show respect to my family and Vanessa. In fact, I voted for President Trump today. My sister's death was never to be politicized." Unbelievable. Now, keep this in mind, folks. The Atlantic is the same outlet that published the anonymous report claiming that Trump had called fallen World War II veterans suckers and losers. The outlet then, as now, did not name any sources. In fact, the reporter behind the new report, Jeffrey Goldberg, was the same reporter behind the suckers and losers report. So the same piece that you're seeing from The Atlantic by the same guy in October of an election year. You've got to wonder, how does this guy get so many of these anonymous sources to talk directly with him? Oh, and I think it is also worth noting that The Atlantic is owned by Laurene Powell Jobs, one of Vice President Kamala Harris's largest donors. So was this encouraged to be released now with fake information? Just a question to ask. With anonymous sources, no sources named, to try to disrupt the race. Now, Mark Meadows, has refuted what was said about Guillen and Trump, for some reason, not wanting to pay the $60,000 funeral cost, saying, this is what Mark Meadows had to say. I was in the discussion featured in the Atlantic's latest hit piece against President Trump. Let me say this. Any suggestion that President Trump disparaged Ms. Gulian or refused to pay for her funeral expenses is absolutely false. He was nothing but kind, gracious, and wanted to make sure that the military and the U.S. government did right by Vanessa Gulian and her family. So after he posted that, again, Gulian's sister shared the post saying, I am beyond grateful for all the support President Donald Trump showed our family during a trying time. I witnessed firsthand how President Trump honors our nation's heroes' services. We are grateful for everything he has done and continues to do to support our troops. Former Trump Pentagon Chief of Staff Kash Patel said, as someone who was present in the room with President Trump during that meeting on December the 4th, he strongly urged that Vanessa Gulian's grieving family should not have to bear the cost of funeral arrangements, even offering to personally pay himself in order to honor her life and sacrifice. In addition, President Trump was able to have the Deputy of Defense designate her death as occurring, quote, in the line of duty, which gave her full military honors and provided her family access to benefits, services, and complete financial assistance. Another comment that the Atlantic had put in this piece, and again, it's just, there's nothing else to look at it but a hit piece. The Atlantic claimed that Trump said, quote, I need the kind of generals that Hitler had, citing, quote, two people who heard him say this. The Trump campaign advisor, Pfeiffer, said, this is absolutely false. President Trump never said this. President Donald Trump has spent his life caring for America's military heroes. As president, he kept our troops out of harm's way, securing the largest pay raise for our troops in a decade, and signed historic VA reforms. As a private citizen, he had financially supported veterans and has forcefully advocated for the Kabul Gold Star families. There has been no greater advocate for our brave military men and women than Donald J. Trump. And I can go through other quotes or other actual quotes with name sources here, refuting what the Atlantic said, but this should come as no surprise. Again, I think it's worth noting the Atlantic is owned by one of Vice President Harris's largest donors, and they're completely anonymous sources, but expect, whether you like it or not, expect this to be a major story from the likes of CNN, MSNBC, and others who see this as an opportunity to try to rebolster Harris's momentum and downplay what some are seeing as an upsurge in Donald Trump's campaign right now. We've got to take a short break. As a matter of fact, we should have done so quite some time ago. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Frankly Speaking Roof Cam is brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact Boss Security for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back as we broadcast live from the Hesselson's studio. Sorry, I ran out to get tea, and I'm running out of time to read the comments. We'll get to those after the next break because I ran late. We're going to have to take a break here pretty soon, and I want to find those times for you about where you can early vote. Wow, a lot of comments coming in. Thank you. Okay, so again, Vanessa Gulian's sister and family. Oh, I had someone ask why would Trump not being president be responsible for this? So this was during his presidency when Vanessa Gulian lost her life, and the reason why there was talks of Trump paying for it directly, because there was some, like, the way I understand it, bureaucracy, and there was a problem with her getting full honors because she was bludgeoned to death by a fellow soldier. So it was kind of the weird behind the scenes. So that's why the timing on that. But also asking what had Harris done to help the families of the servicewoman. But again, this was during Trump's presidency. It was on December 4th, 2020. They're claiming that it happened. So again, the sister and family attorney have slammed the Atlantic editor for claiming that Trump disrespected the murdered Army servicewoman, saying that the reporter, Jeffrey Goldberg, outright lied. Now, the piece written by the magazine editor-in-chief, Jeffrey Goldberg, claims Trump fumed about a $60,000 bill he received from Gulian's family for her funeral during an Oval Office meeting. Now, that seems... that's because after previously telling the Gulian family that he would assist with Vanessa's funeral expenses. So he then, this is what the piece alleges, said, don't pay it, and then said some choice words. Maria Gulian, the sister of Vanessa, slammed the Atlantic report as hurtful and disrespectful and indicated that the former president treated her family with respect in the aftermath of that brutal murder. Natalie Kawan, the attorney for the Gillen family, I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce that, accused the Atlantic editor of lying in the piece. Quote, after having dealt with hundreds of reporters in my legal career, this is unfortunately the first time I have to go on record and call out Jeffrey Goldberg from the Atlantic. Not only did he misrepresent our conversation, but he outright lied in his sensational story. More importantly, he used and exploited my clients and Vanessa Gillian's murder for cheap political gain. He called the timing of Goldberg's report quite suspicious. This supposed conversation that Trump had would have occurred over 4 years ago. Why a story about it now? As everyone knows, not only did Trump support our military, but he also invited my clients to the Oval Office and supported the I Am Vanessa Gillian bill, too. I'm grateful we were successful in getting bipartisan support of the I Am Vanessa Gillian Act. And because of everyone's hard work and efforts, our service members now have more protection and rights while serving our country. Goldberg claims in his piece that Kwan told him, quote, she sent the bill for Vanessa's funeral to the White House, but no money was ever received by the family from Trump. So anyway, that's just a quick overview. Just expect it to be featured heavily in the news cycle the next few days. To this viewer's comment, no, I do not have Goldberg's emails. You seriously overestimate the people who email I have, but I understand your reasoning. Let me take that short break. I want to get those times for you and the dates and the locations of the early voting. Let me get that to you when we come back and read any other comments that come in. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. The Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact Boss Security for all your business and home security needs. We're broadcasting live from the Heselson studio. Thank you for joining us this morning. And thank you to the viewer who sent in the Chemung County early voting times. But let me go through, and I do appreciate it. I've got it right here in front of me now. The early locations in Chemung County is the Chemung County Board of Elections, 378 South Main Street in Elmira, or the new location, you can go to the 4-H building at the Chemung County Fairgrounds. That's 170 Fairview Road, Gate 3, Building 2. Now, when it comes to early times, or early voting times, I should say, it starts Saturday the 26th, and it goes from 9 to 5 on Saturday and Sunday. On Monday, it goes from 9:30 to 5:30. On Tuesday, the 29th, it goes from 9 till 8. So that's a long day. No excuse then. Wednesday, the 30th, from 9 till 8. Thursday, from 8 to 4, probably letting out a little early because of Halloween, but starting earlier too. Friday, the 1st, 9:30 till 5:30. Saturday, the 2nd, 9 to 5. And Sunday, 9 to 5. And then it wraps up. There is none on Monday. And, of course, Tuesday is General Election Day. That's Chemung. In Steuben, there's 3 locations. And by the way, I will say, if you have a chance, go on YouTube and find our YouTube page. We recently did a special on voting and preparing to vote. So if you have an opportunity, you can watch it and get all this information. But I have no problem bringing it up on the show this morning. Steuben County Annex Building, 20 East Morris Street in Bath. Hornell Arts Center. That's 56 Broadway in Hornell. Or the Southeast Steuben County Library right here in Corning at the Civic Center. And similar times for Hornell and the library, it's 9 to 5 every day, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. every day. When it comes to the Steuben County Annex Building, it's 9 to 5 every day except for Tuesday the 29th. It's 9 a.m. till 8 p.m. and Thursday the 31st from 9 a.m. till 8 p.m. There you go. Hope that helps to the viewer asking for that. This is a comment from a viewer. It's great for the Horseheads area because we can vote at the fairgrounds. Yes, I saw that. That was great. I like that they added that location. So we were talking about some of the frustrations behind the scenes, allegedly, between the Harris campaign. I think that's why you saw that Atlantic piece coming out in October, the end of October. We talked about this yesterday, the Biden and Harris stepping up the student loan forgiveness to win votes. You've got, and I know we had a viewer earlier say that I quote the New York Post too often, but this is because their opinion pieces are thought-provoking, and this is one from Michael Goodwin, and he said the presidential election remains close, but most recent polls show Donald Trump leading in nearly all the battleground states. The margins are small, but the trend is clear, leading to nervousness in the Kamala Harris campaign. NBC News reports her team is worried that Michigan is moving toward Trump. That's NBC, folks. and perhaps Wisconsin too, forcing her to seek alternative paths to the 270 electoral votes. And some behind the scenes are critical of her decision to go campaign in Texas, even though that is a close Senate race. It's also telling that Democrat Senate candidates in those states, as well as others in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Montana, are putting distance between themselves and Harris, a sure sign they see her as a loser and don't want to go down with the ship. This again from Michael Goodwin. I'd love to hear your opinion on it. Some incumbent Democrats even boast in ads and debates that Trump, when he was president, signed legislation they sponsored. Miracle of miracles. He's morphed from being a threat to democracy to being a president that they can work with. Things are so bad in Democrat circles that there are rumblings Joe Biden would have been a better candidate. The joy is gone. Now, that's interesting, and that goes back to my thought and my theory that this will be able, if Harris does end up being defeated by Donald Trump, this will be such a huge feather in the cap for Joe Biden, who can now say, I told you I was the only one that could beat him. The Democrat elite said I couldn't do it, and who was right at the end. But I'll continue. For some analysts and Trump supporters, these developments are fueling talk he could actually win the Electoral College in a landslide and maybe even pull off a majority in the popular vote. I really don't like talk like this for a couple different reasons, because it gets some people complacent that, had a long day at work, I'm not going to go out and vote on Tuesday. We're here in landslide. There's no way. If you look at something, I think this is very important to keep in mind. Harris's campaign are saying they're the underdog. That's so close, they have to fight right till the end. Some people in the media and some people kind of more pro-Trump media and some Trump people are saying it could be a landslide. That's not the attitude to have. You've got to act. You've got to be running like you're 20 points down. So I'm not really sure about that analysis. But what Michael Goodwin's thought is, I hope he does both, meaning an electoral college landslide and a majority of and get the popular vote. It's exactly what America needs, says Michael Goodwin. A decisive victory would bring a great moment of clarity for our nation and sound a certain trumpet around the world. Our allies would benefit from having a president who believes in a strong military and honors defense agreements without being trigger happy. Our adversaries, most notably Iran, Russia, and China, would be put back on their heels by a president who won't appease their aggressions. Israel could again count on a White House that has its back instead of one that stabs it in the back. New trade agreements would protect American workers instead of exporting their jobs. In domestic political terms, a Trump landslide would be an unmistakable repudiation of the Democrats' move toward woke radicalism. The culture wars would, for the time being, be settled in favor of common sense and traditional values. The DEI obsession, with its noxious mix of racism and Marxism, would find a deserved spot on the trash heap of history. Parents would no longer be treated by schools as the enemy. And he goes on. And also he talks about a chance for a new tone. Big tech companies would have to conclude that censoring conservatives was a fool's errand should they forget Elon Musk would be in a position to remind them. Just giving some really good points here. Ed Rollins, who ran Reagan's juggernaut in 1984, thinks Trump has a shot at a landslide victory because the polls show his lead is based on his winning the policy argument, including on the border, the economy, and foreign policy. You see the momentum building, said Rollins. Again, I think this is too early for it. I know we're less than 2 weeks out. I think talks like this really at the end of the day aren't helpful. But I think there are points that Michael Goodwin's making that I think are interesting. Basically just saying vote accordingly. Your thoughts on that? Now, again, to show the frustration behind the scenes in the Harris campaign, there is some good news, I guess you could say, for Harris. I think there's probably a lot. I mean, I don't think they're as nervous as they're letting on, only because I think a lot of this is a media narrative. But Bill Gates secretly donated $50 million to a pro-Harris group. I don't know, is this considered a threat when they talk about Elon Musk having the audacity of donating to Trump? So yes, the question is this some type of threat to democracy? The Bill Gates secretly donated $50 million to a pro-Harris group. We've got to take a short break. Stay with us. We'll be right back. I know it's moving quick. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking after this. The Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact Boss Security for all your business and home security needs. A couple comments from viewers as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. They say Trump supports the rich. Well, it's true. I was a lot richer 4 years ago. Thank you. Very good comment. A very good point, too. Another comment from a different viewer. Does anyone else notice that when Harris is saying she is going to put the needs of the people first, she is shaking her head no at the same time? Talk about truthful body language. I had not noticed that, but thank you. Now, she did say over the last, it was yesterday on MSN or on NBC, excuse me, that she was honest with the American people about Biden's mental acuity, that he is capable in every way. Can you say that you were honest with the American people about what you saw in those moments with President Biden as you were with him again and again, repeatedly in that time? Harris saying, of course, Joe Biden is extremely accomplished, experienced, and capable in every way that anyone would want if they're president. So they said you never saw anything like what happened at the debate behind closed doors. It was a bad debate, she said. People have bad debates. But that's the reason that you're here, and he's not running for top of the ticket, the host Jackson said. Well, you have to ask him if that's the only reason why. I'm running for president of the United States. Joe Biden is not. My presidency will be about bringing a new generation of leadership to America that is focused on the work that we need to do to invest in the ambitions and aspirations of the American people. Invest means spend your money. Wow. So he is fine. Then why do they do all this? And why is she there? And that's a good canned answer. Well, you'd have to ask him. That it was all just a bad debate. Now, this is an important note, and this was during this NBC News interview. Hallie Jackson, the host, the White House correspondent, asked, so is a question of pragmatism then? What concessions would be on the table? Religious exemptions, for example? Is that something that you would consider if the Republicans control Congress? This is in reference, obviously, to abortion. So a pragmatism. What concessions would be on the table? Religious exemptions, for example? Is that something that you would consider if the Republicans control Congress? Harris answered, I don't think we should be making concessions when we're talking about a fundamental freedom to make decisions about your own body. So Jackson then asked Harris if she'd be willing to extend an olive branch to people like Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins. Harris responded that she wouldn't engage in hypotheticals, and a basic freedom has been taken from the women of America, the freedom to make decisions about their own body, and that cannot be negotiable. This is what we need to put back in the protections of Roe v. Wade, and that is it. Now, later, after mentioning criticism of the aftermath of the Dobbs ruling by former Representative Liz Cheney, Harris stated, so that's my point about what is non-negotiable. It has to be that we agree that this is so fundamental that we allow women the ability, with their doctor, if they choose, talking with their faith leader, to be able to make these decisions and not have the government tell them what to do. So opposing religious exemption on abortion because you cannot make concessions on that issue. Thank you for last minute waves coming in. Now, it's interesting. This one, you hear about this Atlantic piece that has no sources. It'll be interesting if this gets any coverage. Probably not, because it's too close to Election Day and the media will not do anything to hurt in any way, shape, or form Harris. New claims of plagiarism emerged Tuesday against Vice President Kamala Harris, with allegations including that she fabricated a story about sex trafficking and cribbed the work of other prosecutors, a judge, and even Wikipedia to draft state reports on crime. Harris seems to have invented details of a sex crime case out of whole cloth and taken sentences directly from published work by former California Attorney General Bill Lockyer, as well as a New York jurist. The new allegations were first reported by the Washington Free Beacon. Know that this will not get coverage. Listen, the last one got some coverage, but they use it as an excuse to demean the person that found the news. They even misled at the New York Times by not giving all the information with the report. You know all about that. We talked about it extensively. So I don't think what we'll see is too much coverage of this. Right now, the coverage is going to be if you think it was bad anti-Trump before, get ready. We're getting, when you're talking less than 2 weeks out, it is going to get interesting. And there will be no reporting on anything that could negatively affect Harris. I shouldn't say no, but as much as humanly possible. Now, Trump blasted Obama after he was at a rally where he rapped with Eminem. Donald Trump went after Barack Obama for campaigning for Harris, even going as far as calling his predecessor a jerk. Obama surprised everyone when he rapped Eminem's Lose Yourself in front of Harris supporters at her rally in Detroit. Yes, I guess Eminem was at that rally. Eminem saying, as most of you know, the city of Detroit and the whole state of Michigan means a lot to me, and going into this election, the spotlight is on us more than ever, reminding everyone that it is important to use your voice. I also think people shouldn't be afraid to express their opinions. He said, I find it interesting. and I understand the popularity of Eminem, but on the political front, some of the things he said in the past, there's a lot of controversial things. Doesn't seem to, I guess that stuff is forgotten, just like with Bill Clinton doing campaign rallies. Past controversies are forgotten and just glanced over. Okay. By the way, I meant to mention this at the beginning of the program. Trump has booked that Joe Rogan podcast interview. He is going to be doing the taping of the interview Friday, It has not been confirmed when Joe Rogan will be playing it on his podcast. Now, if you're not familiar, I do not watch it necessarily, but just to give you an idea, the Joe Rogan Experience has an estimated 14.5 million followers on Spotify. His audience is quite large. There was talks, and I guess nothing has been formal yet, with just less than 2 weeks out. There had been talks for Harris to be on his program, but there has been no more on that with any kind of update. Okay, we got to take our last break of today's edition of Frankly Speaking, so stay with us. Yep, we'll be right back after this. That's a great view of Market Street, isn't it? It's the Boss Security Roof Cam. Boss Security in Horseheads, contact them for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking, as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. Wrapping up this morning's edition, a couple comments from viewers. It comes as no surprise that Bill Gates is a Democrat, given how Microsoft tracks your every move online. Thank you very much. Different viewer here. Prop 1 should be a definite no, and that's in reference to the amendment to the New York State Constitution that's up for a vote. My feeling is there is so much packed into this that we haven't been given enough information about it, and trying to, quote, pass this so we can find out what's in it, end quote. I paraphrase Pelosi. Yes, the pass this to find out what's in it. Yes, absolutely. I missed the info session at the Legion, but did see the piece you had, and I thank Frankly Speaking once again. Well, thank you, and we're going to have another update on that. Another comment from Ken. Did you see that Mark Cuban explained why Biden and Harris opened the border? Is because their hearts are too big, and they just expect so many people to want to come to this country. It is interesting at a time when we're lectured about how bad this country is that there's Democrats are saying that you should come here with open arms, but why if it's such a bad country? I see. Okay, made a mistake there. And they just didn't expect so many people to want to come to the country. There we go. That's the point I was kind of making. Thank you very much, Ken. Did you see that? I think this will have a little more, I think this has more sway than a Liz Cheney endorsement, for instance. Former Democrat Representative Tulsi Gabbard reveals she's joined the Republican Party when she was at that Trump rally yesterday, and proud to stand here with Trump today. The Democrat Party has no home for people like us, but we do have a home in the Republican Party, where we are welcomed with open arms by President Trump and so many of you who love our country, she told the crowd. And it is because of my love for our country, and specifically because of the leadership that President Trump has brought to transform the Republican Party and bring it back to the party of the people and the party of peace, that I'm proud to stand here with you today with President Trump and announce that I'm joining the Republican Party. Tulsi Gabbard. Now, Tulsi Gabbard did a great job against Kamala Harris in that debate back in 2019. I think that's a huge endorsement. We have so much to get to with no time to get there. There's a couple of vulnerable House Democrats are shredding Biden on the border crisis, saying in their closing message that it's a mess. Representative Pat Ryan, Democrat from New York, called his closing message emphasizing his willingness to break from his own party. My first commander in the Army always said, you're not doing your job right if you don't, well, we'll say, make a few people mad. So I took that advice. Even my own party, which I stood with Republicans and demanded Biden take action to secure our border. It's a mess. He needs to clean it up. Their loyalty is to big donors and Trump. The only flag I pledge allegiance to is the one I wore on my shoulder in combat. All right, just one last thing. Constant doom scrolling, meaning being on social media, and worrying damages the brain. This coming out right before the election, so keep that in mind. We are out of time for today's edition of Frankly Speaking. Thank you to everybody who joined us. Thank you for all the comments and the questions. I want to thank Bryan Maggs for being on the program. He is running for Chemung County Family Court Judge, and as we keep emphasizing, you can vote for 2 people in that race. So don't forget that as you go into the booth or as you early vote. So thank you again to Bryan Maggs for being on the program. On tomorrow's show, we'll be talking with Mary Tarantelli. She is also running for Chemung County Family Court Judge. That's tomorrow. And we'll learn a little bit about Walk for Life here in Corning. That'll be on tomorrow's program. And then again on Friday, Assemblyman Phil Palmisano. Have a great day, everyone. We'll be back tomorrow morning starting at 6 a.m. with Frankly Speaking. Only on WYDC TV. Big Fox. I look forward to it already.